1995. Kewesi's 15 years or so.
Yeah, and bouncing here in Oakland, California.
And we're going to do the short instructional series and interview a bunch of bouncers and kind of give you our experience and a little how-to.
And the first thing we want to talk about bouncing here is we want to talk about bouncing here specifically in Oakland, California as a single door guy. So we're not talking about bouncing where you're part of a team and you have 5 guys with you or you're working for a security company. Nobody's here to have your back. It's different than being a cop where you have an entire force and a radio and people come have your back. When you have to deal with a situation, it's just you. All the responsibility is on you and how you handle the situation. So it takes a lot of having your wits about you.
Most important thing, 90% of your responsibility in your job as far as setting the tone for the bar is done when you're carding somebody at that first interaction.
Yeah, and checking IDs and using checking IDs as a tool to expose people's character. So that way you don't have problems inside the bar because you don't let them come in the bar.
And even right as they're walking up in Oakland, they let out every inmate from California or a huge swath of the inmates, so they all have the same clear plastic trash bag that they put all their belongings in. You see somebody walking up with that, they're on parole, they're not even allowed to drink, you don't want them in here. No shoelaces, they take their shoelaces at mental institutions around here, so if you see somebody with no shoelaces, you want to find out why that is. Some people walk up with the medical bands on, and you know something's going on. You can watch what they're doing outside as far as drugs and drinking or anything. If they're drinking any alcohol outside, just don't even bother.
People get out of jail, most likely they don't have a current or a valid ID, right? So when we check IDs, I go through all the standards, right? So I first check to make sure it's valid. I look at the ID to see what the expiration date is from there, and from then I kind of go on. And then I'll talk about tools on how I draw people out. I tend to find out that sociopaths don't like to be told what to do. So oftentimes I'll take somebody's ID, and even though I have a flashlight, and even though they've stepped already in the front threshold of the bar, I'll make them walk outside and walk 8 to 10 paces where there's a bright light and make them stand in front of it. So I use this as a tool to deny people entry into the bar, thus keeping the bar safe, right? A lot of door guys don't have that philosophy. They'd rather give somebody the benefit of the doubt and say, well, he seemed like he was old enough, he seemed like he was okay. And then 2 hours later, they're having to physically grab this guy and throw him out the bar after a physical confrontation, right? Now the cops are called, now it's a mess for the bar, now everybody stops drinking, now nobody's spending money, now Trevor's not happy.
Yeah, any kind of conversation, you can start them in any report back and forth, you get a feeling for them.
Yeah.
And at least you're testing them, you're getting that feeling for them, you're getting some sort of relationship going, because you need to either, it's so much harder to drag them out later, and you don't want to startle the herd, you don't want to scare everybody by dragging them out. It's easier just to cut them at the door.
Yeah, much easier to cut them at the door.
There's a few other red flags. People come in, they'll say, I'm not going to cause any trouble tonight. That person's going to cause trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
Or they'll want to buy you a beer, like, you're not buying me a beer.
Yeah, the false friender is the biggest red flag to me, when they want to come in and be your best friend, like right off the bat.
And you're making a snap decision on a bunch of things. Drunk, on drugs, crazy, creepy, all of it.
All of these things, right?
Yeah.
So I'll tell a story. This happened to me. I've recently in my career doing door, and I'd say that's about 6 or 8 months ago. 3 guys came to the door. 2 had IDs. 1 had an invalid ID. I remember that his ID had expired in like 2011, right? If somebody's ID expires a little bit more recently, like it's closer to the date, like their birthday just passed, and I see that they're obviously of age and they're reasonable and they talk to me in a communicative manner, then I'm most likely going to slide. But when you have an ID that's that far expired, to me what it let me know is that this guy was kind of a problem, right? So these 3 guys came in, and I said, hey man, I can't let you in, you don't have a valid ID. And they said, okay, all right, no problem. They walked out, I thought they left, right? So I left the post at the door because as a door guy, you have other responsibilities. I'm busting glasses, that sort of stuff. I look over, they're deep in the bar. I'm like, hey guys, I already told you guys, like you can't be in the bar. He doesn't have a valid ID, right? And then so they look at me at this point and they're like, it doesn't matter, dude. We're not, it doesn't matter. We're not leaving. We're going to drink here anyways, right? So I'm like, oh, great. So this is a situation now where I'm dealing with 3 guys. And at this is about the point where they start looking at me and start flashing gang signs, right? And I'm like, oh, great. Like, this situation is not going to turn out good, right? Because they're obviously not respecting my authority. They just pushed me aside and said they're going to be here anyways. So immediately at that point, I looked at the bartender and was like, hey, let the bartender know these guys don't get drinks, right? At which point they tried to plead their case to the bartender. And the bartender, who had been recently busted by alcohol beverage control, says, hey guys, there's nothing I can do. I'm the manager here and I'm the bartender, and I've already been busted and paying a $5,000 fine, so you have to have ID. And one of the reasons I checked these guys in the first place is because I already had a bad vibe about them. So I already knew something was off, which is the reason why I didn't let them slide through when the guy didn't have a valid ID, right? So at this point, they started asking me, like, so what's up, man? You gonna make a problem for us? You're not gonna let us in over that? So at this point I see that the situation is getting awfully confrontational, and I'm like, great. And they're threatening me, right? They're saying, so what are you going to do, physically throw me out? So at this point I've got several options, right? I can either start a physical altercation, which was like not really forefront of my list, with fighting these 3 gangsters.
Well, and also the whole crowd, the whole bar empties.
Yeah,
everything's over.
Yeah. The whole bar empties.
The party's
The whole bar is empty. So I started an altercation with 3 dudes, which I might or might not come out of it on top. They're already reaching for their waistband. So I always figure that for safety's sake on the job, you always have to assume that somebody has a weapon, right? So at this point, they're not leaving. They're not leaving. They're not respecting my authorities. I could call the cops, but that doesn't look good for the bar either, right? So I look over at the bartender and I give him the nod, and all of a sudden we turn off all the overhead lights, so all the house lights go on, all right? And I look at the guy, and the bartender turns down all the music, and I make it as loud as I possibly can. I'm like, all right, folks, that's it. Bar's closed. Nobody gets a drink till these 3 guys get out of it, right? So now they're looking at me crazy, like how could you possibly do this? So the one guy in front who's making the biggest mess is like, what's up, bro? I don't understand how you're doing this. And I said really nicely to him, underneath my breath, I was like, dude, I asked you nice and you didn't listen to me. And I took a step back and started shouting again. Now at this point, I've got the whole bar involved, right? So now the whole bar is like, get the hell out. Get the fuck out. Get the hell out. Get the fuck out. So at this point, people are throwing napkins at them, bar towels and that sort of stuff. And we eventually get them to exit the bar.
And they still came back and took a swing.
Oh yeah. That's the thing. They still came back. When I stepped outside to now form a wall, one of them came back and took a swing at me, in which I had to sidestep and kick the one guy who tried to take a swing at me in the nuts, right? Then I run up on him, and of course, at that point it's all about intimidation. Don't ever try to take a swing at me. Don't ever try to punch me. I'm looking the guy dead in his face. They want me to go around the corner, but at this point, I'm wise enough to know I'm not following these 3 guys around the corner. But this is what it's like doing door in Oakland, right? Because now here I'm dealing with 3 gnarly gangsters, and one of them who I've kicked in the nuts. And now I've got to make sure they're not coming back to shoot me or stab me at the end of the night, right? But it's really when doing door, we're talking about that's the first number one thing, right? And when I did kick him in the nuts, I could have followed through because he fell on the ground and stomped him a little bit more. But I realized that was enough force that was needed to handle the situation, right? He threw a punch. I immediately moved my head out the way, and I struck back. I ran up on him a little bit, and he got back up, shouted some things at me, and I allowed him to save his manhood as he walked away, right? So even though he got kicked a little bit, he still got up. He called me a bitch. He said everything and every name in the book to me. I took it. I just let it right off my back, and he left, and they never came back to shoot or stab me, right? Which is the ultimate goal of being a door guy.
That thing that you just said about letting him save his manhood is huge in the door industry. We'll touch on it just for a second here. Giving them an out, giving some excuse where they can save some amount of their manhood there allows them to walk away, and a lot of times will save the situation. Even if they call me whatever, they call me you're a bitch, your mother's a whore, whatever, like you're still not coming in, and letting them have that little bit of something in themselves lets them walk away and sober up, and then